Hello and welcome to Craft with Sarah and this Cricut Design Space video on how to frame your layered cardstock designs inside a shadow box or photo frame. In this video, I'll show you how to measure your frame to ensure you get the perfect fit every time, and how to make mats and layers inside your frames to make your layered design pop and look extra special. We'll look at several different ways to frame your designs in this video. If you're using a silhouette or a scan and cut machine instead, head to craftwithsarah.com/help. Choose your type of machine from the list on the screen, and then within there are separate versions of this same video but recorded for the Silhouette Studio software or the Canvas Workspace software. But if you're using a Cricut machine and Cricut Design Space, this is the right video for you, so let's get started. For this video, we're going to start off simple by making a square the exact size of the frame, and then resizing the design to go in the middle and adding a white offset or border around the edge to make it stand out. Then we'll go a little bit more complicated by making this type of frame background where we've got squares underneath, which will allow you to use a pattern paper but still have your design perfectly visible thanks to the squares underneath. And that type of design is really simple to do, but it looks effective with all different types of colours and design. Here are a few examples from some of the free flower pot SVGs available on my website. So you can go from being really dark and dramatic like this one to more simple and bright and colourful like this one. And then once you've mastered that, you'll be able to do things like add extra details and embellishments, for example these gemstones, or be more adventurous with your cutouts. For example, on this one, I've taken all of these hearts out to show the colour underneath. And you can combine it with extra images, like this senior down the side, or even combine the techniques. For example, on this one, I've done the offset layer and the squares, and then I've combined it with a scalloped edge square for a little bit of extra fun. But if you want to go one step further and make backgrounds like this, where you combine loads of images together into one, keep watching until the end of this video and I'll show you where you can find information on how to make gorgeous shadow box backgrounds like this one. Either ones where all of your details are glued together to make a flat style background, or how to turn your backgrounds into effective shadow boxes where all of the different layers are stuck with foam squares to make it really 3D. I love how this one turned out. And the best thing is, you're not just limited to shadow boxes. It works for greetings cards too. More information on that at the end, but for now, let's jump into making our first shadow box background. First up, you need to measure the size of your frame so you know how big to make your design in the software. I've got this shadow box design. This is a ribber frame from IKEA. I don't think they make them anymore. I've had this quite a long time. But any kind of shadow box will do. Or if you're using a regular frame, such as just a normal photo frame, you can use that too, but you might just need to leave the glass out. Otherwise, there won't be enough space for your layered design to pop out. The deeper shadow boxes are nice because you've got all of the space in here for your designs to pop out. I've already taken the glass out of this one just so it doesn't reflect all my camera lights. Turn your frame over and open up all of the little tabs around the edges. And then we'll take out the back. If you're doing a shadow box, you'll probably find that it's also got a spacer inside, which looks something like this. You can use either the spacer or the back of the frame to measure. Do it on the spacer first. I'll show you both ways. So we're going to go from one side all the way to the other. Line your ruler up so it's straight. And then this one is 9 inches. You can measure in centimetres if you prefer. I'm going to do mine in inches. So you can also, if your frame doesn't have a spacer or if you just prefer it this way, you can measure along the back instead. Line the ruler up right against that bottom line so you know it's straight, because if you do it a little bit wibbly wobbly, you won't get an accurate reading. So I'm lining that up, and 9 inches, exactly the same as it should be because they both came out the same frame. So that is the size I need to remember when I go into my cutting machine software. You'll have measured the inside of your frame in either inches or centimetres. By default, Design Space works in inches, but if you'd rather work in centimetres, you can change that by going into the drop-down where your name is and then pressing Settings. From there, click on Canvas, and then you can switch between either imperial, which is inches, or metric, which is centimetres, so you can change it based on how you prefer to do your measurements. Even though I'm in the UK and we do tend to use the metric system, centimetres, a bit more frequently, because I'm so used to working in Design Space set up in inches, I'm going to stick with the imperial for inches. So I'm not going to change that. But if you want to, just switch it over, then press Done. And you can change it back whenever you want to as well. So you don't need to worry that you're going to get stuck on one or the other. You can just change it back by going into those settings at any point. Now that we know the size of the frame and how big we need to make our layers in Design Space, we can start creating the design for the frame. Open up Design Space and start a new project. I've already added on the layered design that I'm going to use to make this particular frame. You can of course use whatever layered design you want. This is the birthday flower pot and it's one of my free SVGs. I'll drop the link to it in the description of this video. To make the background for your frame, go into Shapes over on the left and then choose a square. Close this window by clicking the arrow. And then make this whatever measurement it is that you measured as the back of your frame. So for me, that was 9 by 9 inches. I'm going to make it a bit of a lighter grey, just so it's easier to see that outside border. And then if you only want to add one layer inside your frame, just one piece of card or one colour, that's all you need to do for the frame, super easy. But what you will need to do is resize your design to go on the front. If I drag this over now, you see it's going behind the frame. That's because my square is above the layered design in the Layers panel. Click on the design if yours is doing the same and press Arrange and then Bring to Front. And now it will appear on there. And then you can resize it however large or small you want to make it to fit nicely inside your frame. That would actually be quite a nice size by default. When you're resizing, make sure the padlock icon above the width and the height is closed. If it's open, it means it'll all change out of proportion and you might end up with your image looking squished or stretched. If it's open, you can click it to close it. And then you can either resize using the boxes here, so type in either the width or the height and press enter on your keyboard and the other measurement will change, or you can drag the corners to resize it larger or smaller. Remember that the very edges of your square are likely to be covered up by some of the edges of your frame. Particularly if you're using a shadow box where the fronts of the frames are quite chunky, they normally go in and cover up around 1 centimetre, maybe a little bit more of your frame. So what I wouldn't do, for example, is resize this something like that, because although it does fit into my square on the screen, when this was actually cut out, you would find that the top of the balloons and the bottom of the flower pot are covered over by the edges. And in fact, you might even find that this won't fit in your frame because these very edge bits will be where your frame is all connected to go together, and it might not fit when you add in all of the different layers with your frame squares to the very edge. So go down so you've got a nice border all the way around. Something like that would be much better. I'm going to go for 7.5 inches tall. If you're using a solid coloured background paper, so just a simple colour or maybe a really pale coloured pattern, then this might be okay and you could just cut it out right now and it would all be good. However, if you're going to be using a pattern paper or a scrapbook paper that's really detailed or it's got lots of colours or a busy pattern, you might find that your layered design ends up looking a little bit lost when placed against that background. An easy way to make your design stand out and be easier to see is to add a thin offset layer around the edge. So basically a little border that will go around the edge to be cut in white or some other simple single colour so that it will stand out against the background. To do that, click on your design and then press the offset button along the top. And then you can choose how wide you want your offset to be. It gives you a little preview. You can see this faint coloured blue. That's where the offset would currently be. That's a little bit too big. Let's try 0.15 instead. If you type in the number and then click away into this white box, then it will apply the change. So now this is a much thinner line, which I think is better. We only need it to be quite subtle. It tends to work best if you've got the corner on the circular option rather than the square one. You'll get a smoother outline, and then make sure World Offsets is ticked. And then press apply. If I drag away the layer design, you see this is what I've got now. I'll change the colour to white, which is what I'll cut it out from. And then at the moment, it's got these little lines in that the offset didn't quite take out. I don't want it to cut these tiny gaps, as that will look messy. So you can click your offset if it's got little gaps, and then press the contour button down the bottom right of the layers panel. Press hide all contours, or you can click each of the shapes individually if there are some that you want to keep and only some that you want to hide. But I want to get rid of all of mine, so I could press that hide all contours. Hit the close button, and now those holes are filled in. So this will cut as one simple outline, and I'll then glue that behind my layered design and then on top of my pattern paper, and it will stand out a lot more. Here's how it looks when it's cut out, both with and without that offset layer, so you can see the difference that it makes. Next, let's take a look at how to use mattes and layers inside the shadow box to build up extra visual interest and to draw the eye towards the design that you're putting in the middle. This time I'm using my generic flower pot design, which is another free SVG. I've still got my original background, which is 9 by 9 inches. That's the size that was measured at the start of this video. This time I'm going to add a couple more squares into the middle. The idea will be that the big square will be cut from pattern paper that coordinates with the design, and then I'll have a darker border layer and then a lighter colour underneath. That means that my flower pot will stand out against my pattern paper, but without having to add the offset layer around the edge. It's a little bit of a simpler and more elegant way of adding a nice solid background colour, whilst making sure you can still have some extra patterns and details. So you can either click on your square and press the duplicate button at the top to make a copy, or you can go into shapes and choose another square. I want to make this quite a bit smaller than the original, so I'm going to go for 6.5 inches. And that looks good, I think, because I want lots of my background pattern to be able to show up, and also I'm conscious that the very edges will get covered up. So although it looks like quite a lot of space on the grey here, it won't be quite as much once it's actually in the frame. And I'll do this in the same dark purple as the flower pot so it matches in. And then I'll duplicate it again, and this time make it a little bit smaller. I'm just going to take 1/4 inch off each side, so 6.25 by 6.25, and make this, I think, a really light purple, because I want my layered design to stand out nicely against it, and I don't think if I made it the light purple that's this one here, it would actually be light enough. So I'm going to go just off with a lilac-y colour, and then that will sit in the middle. I think my border's actually a little too thin, so let's go 6 by 6, so there's a little bit more showing, like that. And then my layered design, I again need to go arrange, bring to front, and then you can either size it so that it fits nicely inside your squares, like that. Or what I prefer to do, but of course it's just complete personal preference, is I like to have it slightly going over the edge. I just feel that that means you get more of an impact because your papercraft in the middle will be larger, and I just like how it looks, but again, it's completely up to you. So I would go for something like this. If you're making a rectangular frame, then what I would recommend doing when you're adding the smaller bits inside is to do it by typing in your width and your height rather than by dragging the corners. This is why. If I duplicate my background, this is A4 size, and make it a different colour. If you were just to drag the corners down, it works fine on a square because it's the same on both sides, but for rectangles, when you resize, if you just do it by dragging the corners, you'll see it gets out of proportion with itself. I've now got a really big gap along the top and the bottom, but a much smaller gap on the left and the right. If that's the look you're going for, that is absolutely fine, but you will find, especially when you start doing just little borders, it's going to look a little bit uneven. A neater way to do it so that you get the same gap is to do it by resizing the width and the height instead. If I duplicate this one again, and this time, instead of dragging the corners, I will do it by taking 2 inches off of each side. Okay, that didn't work because I still had my padlock closed, so it changed the height in proportion. So let's undo that. I missed that crucial step. All right, so I've gone back to the original size. I'm going to untick the padlock by clicking on it. And now take 2 inches off each side. Take 2 off the width and 2 off the height. Now, when this goes in the middle, let's go align center to put it exactly in the middle. Now it's exactly the same gap around each of the sides, which in my opinion looks a little bit neater, but if you want to do it the other way, that's absolutely fine too. And then I do the same for my one in the middle. Let's go blue. This time I would take 1/2 inch off, again with the padlock open. So that'd be 9.19 and, oh gosh, 5.77, I think. And then if we line that up this time, you see once again, the border is exactly the same thickness. I just wanted to sneak that little bit in there for if you're doing a rectangular frame instead of a square one. But now let's head back to my square flower pot project. This would then be ready to cut out and stick together. So what you would do is you would glue all of these pieces together, and then you would assemble your layered design separately and then glue it into your frame. One of the things I really struggle with when creating shadow boxes is lining things up straight. I am terrible at sticking things straight. If you have a scoring wheel or a scoring stylus for your Cricut machine, then there's a little trick you can do to make it way easier to line things up straight. And by doing it this way, you'll get it perfect every single time. If you don't have a scoring wheel or stylus for your Cricut machine, or if you're using a particular type of machine that maybe doesn't have one, such as the Joy Extra, keep watching because I'll show you an alternate way you can do the same sort of thing once I've gone through how to do it with the scoring tools. If you have a scoring wheel, this doesn't quite work out as well because I found that the scoring line that the wheel does is really, really thick. So sometimes you can still see the edges of the score even when it's stuck together. The scoring stylus seems to do a much better job. The stylus is the one that sort of looks like a pen and fits into your A clamp, and it's suitable for the Explore or the Maker models of machines, or the different types of them. All right, so what we're going to do is we're basically going to get the Cricut to score around the edges of these 2 purple squares so that we can then line up the cardstock and know it's going to go in exactly the right position. Before we do that, we need to make sure it's going to score in the right place. So we need to center everything perfectly on the screen. To do that, drag a box around your layers, not your layered design. You don't need that one, just the squares, and then press Align and then center. You see those shifted a little bit, so now everything is perfectly aligned with each other. I'll start off by doing the edge of the dark purple box. So let's hide the lighter one. Click onto the dark purple, and then on a Windows computer, press the Alt key on your keyboard. If you're on a Mac, it would be the Option key instead. And then when you've pressed that, wiggle your mouse ever just the slightest amount. And your cursor, your mouse, will change to get a little plus icon next to it. So if I press my Alt key now, give it a little wiggle, see there's now a plus. When you see the plus, single click with your mouse, the left click button, and that makes a copy of the layer in exactly the same place. My layers panel now, you see I've got one here and one here. Just to show you the difference, I'll click on this top one and change the color. Let's go yellow. Then if I hide it, you see my original one is there underneath. So these two are in exactly the same place. Click on your new one and under Operation, change it to Score. And then for now, I'm going to hide my original one by hovering over it in the Layers panel and clicking the eye. Drag a box around the two layers that are left, my grey and the score line. I've now got them both selected. Down the bottom of the Layers panel, press Attach. Attach is what tells the Cricut that we want it to do the scoring on that square. So now it will score this square in the middle of my pattern paper, and then when I go to stick on my dark purple, which is now at the bottom because Attach brings it to the front, so we'll just go Arrange Center Back. So now when I've got my darker purple, I'll be able to line it up along that score line and know everything is perfectly straight and I've got it exactly in the middle. And you can do the same for any other squares you've got, for example, this lighter one. So let's click on that one, press Alt on my keyboard, move the mouse, and then click. And now I've got a copy. Hide the original, click on the copy, change it to a score line in the Operation drop-down, and then select that. Press Shift on your keyboard and choose the other square that you're attaching it to, and press Attach. So now, when my darker purple piece is cut out, it's also going to score this perfect square in the middle. So then, when I've got this one, which you now can't see, let's move it down, there we go. So when I've got this one to glue on top, again, I can line it up against that score line and know that it will be in exactly the same place. You can also do the same with your layered design, although it doesn't work if you've got it hanging over multiple sides like I do. But if yours was in the middle and it perfectly fit in there, you could also duplicate the bottom layer and score that. So if I drag a box around everything and go Align and Center just to show you, and then I'll explain why I actually don't do this, but in case you want to, here's how you can do it. Open up the layers of your layered design by clicking the arrow, then click the very bottom layer, hover over, press Alt, wiggle your mouse, and click to make a copy. And that's just made a copy of the very bottom layer. For now, I'm going to hide my main layered design. Then you can change that bottom layer to Score. Select that, press Shift and choose the square it's going to go on, and press Attach. And then it would score the outline of the design, so you'd know exactly where to stick your layered design once you've made it. It won't actually do it in dashed lines with the score, it will be a solid line. It's just that Design Space shows score lines as dashed lines on the screen, so you know which ones it's going to score. The reason I don't do this is that the scoring tools are a little bit thick. They don't give a really thin line, so sometimes you can still see the edges, especially where it's trying to get into tight corners or curves. This is quite a delicate image with all of the leaves, and I think even if I was to glue my layered design on top, you would still see some of those scored bits, and it's just not going to look that neat. It's not as obvious on the nice square edges of the outer bits, which is why it works for that, but not so much on more detailed designs. So let's just undo that attach, and I'm going to delete that score line. So that's how you could do that if you have a scoring wheel or scoring stylus for your machine. But what if you don't have a scoring wheel or scoring stylus? Well, here's how you can set up some guidelines just with your regular Cricut blade. What we're going to achieve is a tiny little cut in each of the corners so that you can get your Cricut to do a little bit of a notch around all those edges, and then you'll be able to see when you're gluing on the squares where to put them. This is a little bit more involved and a little bit more complicated than just doing it with the score lines, but once you've done it a couple of times, then you'll have the process in your head and it will go a lot quicker. And remember, this is of course completely optional. If you are happy to just glue them on by eye, absolutely do that. But if you're like me and you do struggle with lining things up straight and getting them exactly in the middle, this is a nice way to do it. First up, we're going to do it for the outline of the darker square. So I'll hide my layer design and the lighter one. Go into shapes and choose a score line. Don't worry, we're not actually scoring. And then hide it with the arrow. Change the size of this to 1 inch. And then with it still selected, under the operations menu, change it to a basic cut. That means the Cricut will now just cut that line. You won't need a scoring tool. Duplicate it by clicking and pressing the duplicate button at the top of the layers panel. And then we need to rotate this. So under the rotate box, put in 90 for 90 degrees and press enter on your keyboard. So we've now got a horizontal and a vertical line. Drag a box around both of those and press align left, and then align top. If you click away, you see we've now created a little right angle. Drag a box around them both and group them by pressing the group at the top of the layers panel. That now means we can move them about together and they're going to stay joined. I want this to be a bit smaller. We made it 1 inch just so that we could see what we were doing, but for the actual layer design, I'm going to go for just 1/4 of an inch on each of those corners. But you can make it as long as you want. Just bear in mind, if you were cutting 1 inch down from each corner, that's a very big cut, and it might impact the integrity and the structure of your final design. So I'm going to go for just a little 1/4 of an inch, 0.25, little triangle. Click it and make a copy. For the copy, I'm going to name this top left so that I know later on when I've got lots of these that this is the one that will go on the top left of my square. For now, let's also hide that base square. The next bit's going to get a little bit hard to see, but what I'm going to do is line this up against the square. So with this selected, and if you're struggling to get it to click, sometimes it can be hard, click it in the layers panel instead. And then press shift and choose the square. Go align left, and then align top. Now if I click away, you can't see that original corner anymore. But if I hide the square, you see it is showing up here, exactly lined up to the top left corner. That's what we want, so drag a box around both of them again and group them. The reason we're grouping them is that we can then line up the next corner. If you don't group them, it means when you try and line up the next corner, they'll become out of line, so your top left one won't necessarily be in exactly the right place anymore. But if you group them, they'll stay exactly as we want. All right, let's get that original, duplicate it, and this time I'll call it top right. This one will go against this corner, so I need to click it and then press flip horizontal, and now that is facing the other way. Then I can select that and my group over here, and this time align right because we want it against this edge, and again align and align top. Click on the original group of the square and your top left and ungroup it. Then I'm going to hide that one, drag a box around those two and group them, and then I'll call this top. Duplicate it once more and call this bottom, because we also want to add those little corners on the bottom. For now, I'm going to hide that bottom one, turn my square back on, and then group it. So I'm grouping my square to those top two corners. So that we don't get confused, I'll just hide that original one. Okay, then we can go arrange, center back, turn on those bottom ones. You see these are appearing here. We need these to face the other way so that they'll match up with these corners. So I'll click and go flip vertical, and they're now facing the correct way. So you can drag a box around everything and go align left, and align bottom. And now those are perfectly along the bottom corners. Click the square and ungroup it, and then hide the square. So now you should just be seeing your corners. drag a box around all of them and group them. Then we can turn on our squares again. You might need to play about with the layers to get them back in the right place. So we should have 3 things turned on right now. We've got the corners, the grey square and the purple square. Drag a box around all of those and press align and center. So now everything's in the middle of each other. If I hide my purple square, you can see those are my corners. We need to tell the Cricut that we want it to cut these little corners in the grey piece of card. So drag a box to select both of those and then press attach. Now it will cut the square of my pattern paper and it will cut the little corner in the middle. Send that back to the back. And then when I cut this bit out, I'll know exactly where to glue it because I'll be able to see those little cut lines in each of the corners. So I can line it up and it will fit perfectly. Right, let's just put that back in the middle. You could then do exactly the same for the next one. I'm not going to show you all those steps again because it's exactly the same as we've just done, but just to give you an idea of how you would get started, we can hide those 2, turn on that original corner, and then you would do the same thing. So duplicate, call that one top left, and then align it against the top left of there. Then you do the top right, and then follow exactly the same steps until all your corners are done. And then line it up in the middle of your purple one and then attach your corners. So just like I just showed you, nothing different. Although it does take a little bit longer to get that set up with the corners, the nice thing is once you've saved your project, it means that you can then use those corners on other projects another day. So if you were doing lots of different frames or maybe even just several different over a large space of time, you wouldn't need to add the corners again. You could just load this project and then make your changes. Even if you're resizing it, it doesn't really matter. You could make these squares smaller or bigger and your corners will resize in proportion. So in my opinion, I do think it's worth setting this up at least for one project because then you've got it as a template going forward and it means you'll get everything lined up perfectly in your frame. So now let's take a look at this when I've got it all cut out and also a few different designs using some of the other free flower pot SVGs so that you can see how changing the colours or adding bolder or lighter backgrounds can really enhance or change the effect that we're making. Here's how my finished design turned out with my background and then my 2 squares in the middle and then my layered design stuck on top. It would now all be ready to go in the frame, and gluing all of these squares was super easy thanks to the little corners to know where to put it. Here are another couple of examples to show how changing up the backgrounds can really change the overall effect. So for this one, I've used a very dark, moody background to draw the eye in. For this one, I've added some sticky gemstones in the middle and the corners, so you can, of course, embellish these however you like. And then finally, super simple with some bright colours. But that's not all you can do. Once you get more confident at making your shadow box backgrounds, you can then add extra details, such as playing about with different shapes. On this one, I've added a scalloped square behind my main glitter square to give that little bobbly edge, and I've combined it with the offset that we did for the birthday flower pot to show an extra little border around my St. Patrick's Day flowers. You can play about with cutting out details. So on this one, I've cut lots of little hearts out of the square here to show the colour underneath, just to add a little bit more visual interest. And you can even combine it with other images, such as this one, where I found an image to cut to go down to finish off the design. You can also play about with things like adding names or dates to make a truly personalised shadow box. But that's not all you can do. You can up-level this a whole load more with custom backgrounds. Here's how. Here's another look at some of those detailed frames I showed you at the beginning of this video. We've got the one where all of the parts are glued together, and then this one which was in the frame itself at the beginning, which uses foam squares on all of the background details to make it layered all the way around. If you'd like to know how you can combine images or SVGs to make your own custom backgrounds for any theme or occasion, head to craftwithsarah.com/join to check out the Craft with Sarah Premium membership. Joining the membership gives you access to all of my papercraft classes that are exclusive to that membership. A new class is released every single month, and for April 2025, that is this class on how to make these detailed, beautiful backgrounds. You'll also get other amazing benefits from joining the membership too. For example, design credits added to your account every single month that you can use to download the premium SVGs from my shop at no additional cost. You'll also be able to enter member-only challenges on the website, submit design requests if you have any suggestions for what you'd like to see coming up, and it will remove all the display advertising from the website, so you won't get any of those annoying ads pop up anymore. But let's talk a little bit about this class. As with all of the classes that come as part of the membership, they're all recorded 3 separate times, once using Cricut Design Space, once using Silhouette Studio, and once using Canvas Workspace for scan and cut machines. That means that if you're using one of those types of machines, you can follow along in your specific machine's software. So these classes are not Cricut specific. I have recorded them in different softwares to make them accessible to a much wider range of machines. As part of this class, you'll see how to take the images, and yes, all of these are included as part of the class too, and create the background. First up, we'll do this flat version, so we'll add them all together, and then we'll see how to do things like extend shapes down to fill in a space, how to join shapes together to make a repeating pattern, and how to take little parts from one design and move them to use them in your backgrounds. Then I'll show you how you would cut this out and stick it all together. So for this one, as I've said, most of these bits are glued, which means the background looks fairly flat. I only used my foam squares for the little details, such as the bushes, the flowers, and the sun. If you want to go even further and make a more dimensional shadow box, so this is more like the traditional shadow box SVGs that you might be using already, then there's a part 2 included in the class that shows how to turn this into this. This one is put together differently. It's a little bit hard to show on video, but for this one, instead of gluing all of the background, the rainbow layer is raised up with foam squares, the hill has a second layer of foam squares, the grass at the bottom has a third layer, and then the purple frame is glued on top. Which means you've got lots of beautiful dimension in here, and it looks much more realistic in the flesh compared to this version, because all of that depth of the foam squares draws your eye in and helps add to the visual perspective of making the rainbow look like it's further away than everything else on the frame. If you've ever wanted to design your own shadow boxes, this class gives you a great head start into the process of doing that. And you don't have to use flowers and rainbows and clouds. You can use the same steps shown in the class to design frames for any occasion using any SVGs that you have. So what are you waiting for? Head to craftwithsarah.com/join to find out more about the membership. Or if you are already a member, head to craftwithsarah.com/classes. Make sure you're signed into your account, and then you'll be able to enroll in not only this class, but all of the other classes included on the site. There are only a few there at the moment, but remember, a new class is added every single month, and each class will be recorded for Design Space, Silhouette Studio, and Scan and Cut Canvas Workspace. If you have any suggestions for future classes, let me know in the comments. But for now, we're going to finish up this video on designing our shadow box backgrounds. I hope that you enjoyed this video on how to frame your layered cardstock projects inside a shadow box or a photo frame using your Cricut machine. If you did, please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to my YouTube channel for loads more Design Space and Cricut tutorials. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!